The march, which ended in a mass lobby of Parliament, was held to demonstrate for the future of Cornwall's mines in the face of the continuing tin crisis. Our reporter, Mark Roselli, was with the miners throughout their journey, and he compiled this report on the day's events.
For me, the big day started at 5 in the morning, when I arrived at Truro railway station, along with about 50 miners from Wheal Jane, South Crofty and Wheal Pendarvis, plus various councillors and assorted mine managers. The train, when it arrived, was completely packed. 200 miners had managed to get away to join the march, while still leaving the Duchy's mines working at full pitch. Some had taken holiday leave, others had agreed to work an extra day for free to make up for lost time. The rest of the 500-strong contingent was made up of miners' families and their supporters, councillors, politicians, mine management and trade unionists. The Wheal Jane Crofty Charter, as it was called, was a minor miracle of planning and organisation. But the really difficult part was to come when we reached London. The man responsible for organising the mass lobby of Parliament was Alan Taylor, a safety officer at Wheal Jane. I asked him what his aims were in organising the lobby.
The main object is to get as many people representing us as possible, together with as many members of Parliament as we possibly can, to make all the members of all parties aware of the situation in Cornwall and the help that we need to keep the industry going.
Can you explain what each group of lobbyists will actually be doing?
They'll be lobbying any members that are actually in the House. We're hoping to lobby as many of the 650 as we possibly can.
What's a realistic target?
I think 400. If we do 400, I shall be delighted.
How many groups have you got doing that?
I've got 12 groups.
That's an awful lot of MPs each.
It's an awful lot of MPs each.
Can you just briefly run through the actual mechanics of lobbying an MP?
Well, on entering the House, they obtain a green card from the Sergeant-at-Arms, which they fill in, addressed to the MP of their choice, then return it to the Sergeant-at-Arms, who sends it to the MP concerned, who will either come and meet the people lobbying him in the lobby, or he'll send them a written reply, if he's available. Of course, all members are not always in the House at the time.
Are your groups going in with hit lists of MPs?
Hit list is the wrong word. We have lists. I have a potted history of every MP in the House, together with his photograph, so that the lobby group can identify an individual MP that they probably have never seen before.
You're likely to meet some mavericks and some characters actually in the House. How are you going to go about briefing each lobby group so that they're able to field questions from, after all, MPs of all political parties? Dennis Skinner 1 minute and Keith Joseph the next.
Yes, and we could handle them both. The groups, first of all, consist of a cross-section of civil dignitaries, local authority representatives and people from the industry, so that we feel we can field any question that's thrown at them within the group. We have a wide enough cross-section of people within each group that we can handle pretty well every eventuality.
So the groups have been hand-picked then?
Oh yes.
And well-balanced?
I hope so.
Just to make sure, Alan had organised special briefing sessions for his dozen or so lobby groups, which kept him quite busy throughout the 6-hour journey.
Have we all had one of these? Regardless of political persuasions of any of us, because today is apolitical, nothing to do with politics. We put the same message over to the MPs, and that is the message. On the second page, it explains what we're asking for, what it's all about, what we're going for. Are we all happy? Do we all know what we're going to do? And do we all know who you're with?
But, of course, the charter train was mostly packed, not with officials, lobbyists and organisers, but ordinary mining people with ordinary concerns and ordinary fears. Sheila Oates is married to a worker in Wheal mine.
Ever since from October the 24th, living from 1 week till the next, just wondering, how many more wage packets we're going to receive. I mean, the point is our future's just in the balance, because if Wheal closes, with my husband being nearly 53, we stand no chance of another job. I feel that our MPs have fought for us, and I do really feel that Mr. Gilbert has put up a very good fight. My son also works at the mine. He is also a fitter, but he's aged 26. Even for him, there's no hope of another job, I feel, at the moment anyway.
It's said that Wheal mine might go on for some months before there's any decision on whether to close it or not, and again it might be some months before the government decides whether it's going to give any aid or not. How do you think that wait will actually affect people in Wheal?
Well, I think the strain is, the people must be feeling the strain. The majority of people that I know are. And I really feel, I don't think Geever will last out that long. I would say just a matter of a few weeks. I don't think it's going on a few more months.
Fears like those of Sheila Oates aren't new in Cornwall. In 1978, Cornish miners marched on London, but this time to save Wheel Jane and not all the mines in the duchy. Cliff Elson, a mine shift boss at Geever, was involved in the organisation of both the 78 march and yesterday's.
Yes, we went up on a lobby in 1978, and that was for asking for government funds for the saviour of Wheel Jane at the time, and we like to think that that was successful because Wheel Jane is still in existence at the moment.
Do you think, can you say in your heart of hearts that was directly due to your lobby, your march on London?
Yes. At that moment in time, the ownership of Wheel Jane was in the hands of Consolidated Goldfields, and they were without a doubt intent on turning off the pumps, pulling out altogether, removing all financial assistance or running of the mine in any way, shape or form. And at that moment in time, of course, the government did encourage local authorities and put money in themselves into the running of the pumps and keeping Wheel Jane going, while various entrepreneurs and various other companies looked at the mine to see if it was feasible.
How much money are you actually looking for?
We're not a lame duck, and I think that is something that must be stressed. What we're looking for is we're looking for financial assistance to get us over a sticky spot that we're in at the moment in order to continue development of the mine. We're looking for investment in the future. We're looking for investment in the mining industry so that there's a mining industry tomorrow. Mining isn't like a superstore. It isn't like a well that you can just put the lid on. It isn't even like an oil line that you can put a blank end on and just turn it on when it's available or when you need it or when the price is right. Mining is something that's alive underground. If you allow it to die underground and fill up with water and deteriorate and everything else deteriorate, then it's lost, and it takes decades to get it back into being. And so we're really after an investment in the future for Cornwall, the future for the tin mining industry, the future for the resources of this country, the future for my children.
Do you expect the mines in Cornwall to be in operation and still producing tin when they grow up and looking for jobs?
If the mining industry isn't in being in Cornwall when they are looking for jobs, then this country is going to be in a very, very sorry state.
Do you think whether the mining industry will be in existence or not then is going to depend very much on what happens on this march?
Yes, I do. I think it's directly related. Bearing in mind that Wheel Jane originally closed during the time of the First World War, and it was intended to reopen Wheel Jane at that time, the company that closed it, and it took, 60 years before it was reopened, and the amount of massive investment to reopen a mine is such that it would be totally impractical. They just cannot allow this industry to die.
How much do you want?
As a round figure at the moment, we're talking about £50 million, which sounds an awful lot of money.
That's straight away, is it?
That's the figure that is put to the fore at the moment. But bear in mind, we're not talking about one mine, and we're not talking about a few jobs. We're talking about the total industry of producing tin metal in its concentrate form from the county of Cornwall. And bear in mind that 50 million spread over possibly 5 years is small potatoes compared to a lot of money that's being pumped into industry.
But it wasn't all worry and economics, though, aboard the charter yesterday. 50 musicians, aged between 9 and about 50-ish, were tucked away in the front compartment of the train. Mostly from Pendeen Silver Band, there were also representatives from Camborne and Redruth bands. And why not have a short practice before the big day? But the band was just the icing on the cake. The day was really about people like Sam Searle, now a face worker at Wheel Pendarvis. Sam's been earning his living down Cornish mines for almost 20 years. He told me he couldn't imagine any other way of life.
It's dirty work. It's very hard work. I mean, I'm 51, but I'm still doing the job now that I was doing 20 years ago, and it doesn't really get any harder. Yes, you do get more efficient at it, and like I'm a bit slight built really. I'm not a big chap, but and I've got to make the machines work for me. But it's hard and it's dirty, and it's wet at times. It's not wet everywhere, but funnily enough, most of the best tin is in the wet areas, unfortunately.
What do visiting coal miners think of Cornwall's tin mines?
Coal miners aren't very... I've took a few coal miners down and they're not very keen. We haven't got the support problem that coal has, so we don't use the amount of timber they use. And without timber, they seem to be very lost.
They keep wondering whether the ceiling's going to fall on their heads.
That's right, yes.
Do you enjoy being a tin miner?
Oh yes, well I should do, shouldn't I? If I've been down 20 years, yes, I love it. It means everything to me. To be perfectly honest, without the mines, I don't think, personally, I'm suffering with, at the moment, with what we call white finger. I got in mining, alright, you could say, well, why don't you give up mining? But my hands get so cold now that I wouldn't be able to work on the outside anyway. So I got to stick to mining, and I wouldn't want anything else. Mining is everything for me, and it's everything for a lot of miners.
Miners like Arthur Weatheralt. His family's been in and out of tin mining for 6 generations. He himself worked at Wheal Jane and South Crofty. His sons are also miners.
It's not an easy life. It's one of the hardest, most dangerous lives in the world. I had a young boy, 21, killed beside me. It doesn't stop me mining, and doesn't stop them mining. It's in your blood, it gets in your blood, and it's a terrible thing. It's not the ideal life, but it's a way of life. It's one we understand and one that we can do.
You love it, don't you?
Not now. I wore out one pair of hands, and I ain't wearing it anymore. But if I was needed, I'd go back again.
If you were 20 years old now?
Yes, I would. Strange fascination. You've been where nobody else ever been when you're on a development mine. You could be 2-3 miles underground, maybe 3 or 4 miles along the ground. And it's a terrible fascination to go back in to see that blast that you've made in the end when you're developing, which is slightly different to big mine stoping. Well, you know, no one's ever been there before you, and you want to see that you pulled a good round, that you a clean square tunnel. That's what you're after. Your blast should be good, and that's terrible, strange fascination. It's you and nature, and your life is in your hands, really. You know, mine. And nowadays the money is good, but they boys earn the money. Don't ever anybody question that. If they want to question it, go down and do a shift with them. Put up a raise. That'll sort them out. That sorted them out from the boys. You've got 100 foot to go, and when you blast there and you climb up that ladder, chain ladder, you don't know what's up there. You'll never know what's up there. You'll never know till you get to the end of that. There could be a piece up there waiting to get you. It doesn't have to be very big to fall 100 foot to kill you. It's, you know, makes you really wonder sometimes. We're going to get wet today, but none of the miners here will mind this. They've been wet. They know what it's wet. Spend the whole week being wet mining. But your Wheal Jane was a very wet mine. Now it's dried out a bit, but whoever goes deepest in Cornwall will get all the water anyway. So there's a lot more wet mining to be done.
The miners and their supporters arrived in London at 11 o'clock in the morning, and there followed a mad scramble to travel to the other side of the city, to St. Paul's, where the big march was due to get underway at 1 o'clock. I'm not sure that the organisers had quite imagined the effect of 500 Cornishmen and women trying to get through a single underground tube turnstile in a hurry. Certainly London Underground didn't quite know what to make of it, but everybody made it eventually, banners more or less intact, and after a brief service in a park near St. Paul's, the march got underway, half an hour early. The banners were all up as the marchers passed down Aldgate Hill and along Fleet Street, the flag of St. Piran, the emblems of Givor, South Crofty and the rest. But they didn't seem to make much impression on Londoners I talked to. Few of them had even heard of the tin crisis, let alone Cornwall's own problems.
Do you know much about the tin crisis?
I can't say I do. I haven't heard a great deal about it. No.
Do you know what this demonstration is all about?
Well, not until I just saw it. It's from Cornwall, something to do with the work down the tin mines or something.
Did you know there was a tin crisis?
No, we didn't at all, no. Not until I saw this.
Do you know what this demonstration is all about?
No, never heard of it.
Have you heard of the tin crisis?
No. Can't say I have.
Do you know what this demonstration is all about?
No, it's the first I've seen of it.
Have you heard of the tin crisis?
No.
You didn't know that Cornish mines are threatened?
No.
Cornish tin mines?
No.
What this demonstration is all about?
Well, I'm afraid I don't, no.
Do you know what this demonstration is all about?
No, I'm afraid I don't.
Do you know what this march is all about?
Well, no, I don't really know. I suppose it's something to do about the tin mines.
Have you heard of the tin crisis?
No, I haven't.
The whole march lasted no more than 45 minutes, but in that time the Cornish marchers had passed through the heart of the City of London, home of the London Metal Exchange, scene of the innumerable conferences and meetings of the International Tin Council, and down the length of Fleet Street, whose inhabitants have largely ignored the potential disaster that's staring Cornwall in the face. Leading the march, behind the band of course, had been the three Davids, Mudd, Harris and Penhaligon, and many Cornish dignitaries resplendent in gold and silver chains of office. The average Londoner seemed happy to enjoy the spectacle. But what were the journalists and bankers making of it all? And what did they make of this song, the inevitable end to a Cornish assembly? And so the march ended within a stone's throw of the River Thames. But the real behind-the-scenes work was just about to start. 200 lobbyists made their way to Parliament, some to lobby individual MPs throughout the afternoon, trying to win extra support within the House for the Cornish cause. But most went to attend a special open meeting in the great conference room of Westminster Hall. For the next 3 hours, a succession of leading MPs, mostly from the opposition parties, turned up to talk, to listen and to answer questions. It became clear that Cornwall's mines have many allies on the other side of the House, if not amongst the Conservative ranks, always excepting, of course, Cornwall's own MPs. One such supporter is Michael Foote, the former Labour leader.
Read in the newspapers the lobby was coming up today, and I'm very glad to have an opportunity of meeting some who have come, because when I was in the government, I went down there, and I went down into the tin mine there, and could see for myself, and that's what this government ought to do. Go down and see for themselves and keep it going, because despite all the troubles about the price, there's no doubt that in the years to come we're still going to be wanting plenty of tin, so I wish the very best of luck to those who've come up on the lobby today.
Do you regard our tin mines as an asset that can actually be allowed to close down?
No, of course not. It should be stopped. We had to face crises like this under the Labour government, you know, and we invested some money in it, and they made a lot of money afterwards, and so I think it's a perfectly good proposition, not only from the point of view of Cornwall, but of the point of view of the government of the country as a whole. So I wish the very best of luck to the Cornish tin miners.
Another supporter was John Smith, the Labour Party's front-bench spokesman for industry and trade. He addressed the meeting and he pointed out that if Cornish tin mines closed down, Britain's balance of payments would suffer as we would be forced to import all of our tin needs. I asked him afterwards if he thought that £50 million was a reasonable price for securing the future of the tin mines.
Yes, I do. I think the government's problem, though, is that it's committed to market forces, but then market forces lead you sometimes to absurd conclusions. The market force is conditioned to, a profit in a fairly short period in the future. But we're now dealing here not only with people's lives over a long period of time, but important national considerations, such as the balance of payments, which the market simply cannot take account of, which is why I think there has to be a government acceptance of responsibility.
In the recent adjournment debate, Mr. Penhaligon was addressing questions to Mr. Morrison, and Mr. Morrison said it was impossible to talk about government giving grants until it knew how low the price of tin would actually sink, so it knew how much support was necessary. In your view, is that a reasonable attitude to take?
No, it's not. And I'm certainly not prepared to take that from a government which has slashed regional development grants already. We know that for the area which we're talking about, regional development assistance is probably less than 50% of what it was before the government got their hands on it. So there's no good faith there. I think what he should have done in that circumstance was to say, in principle, they were willing to assist, but the precise amount remained to be identified. That would be a much more reasonable view to take.
You think the government's evading the issue?
I think there's little doubt about that.
And Dr. David Owen, the SDP leader, also spoke strongly in favour of the mines. I asked him if he considered the industry to be a national asset.
I think it is a very important strategic reserve. I took that view when I was Foreign Secretary, when actually the whole question of Wheel Jane came up, and the whole David Penhaligon was arguing very strongly in part of the Liblab Pact for the saving of the mine, and I took the view that we should have an indigenous supply of these metals.
Do you feel that the government has it within its grasp to perform a simple rescue here?
It certainly has it within its grasp to give the capital assistance which would allow the tin mines to ride out this very difficult period over the next few years, and also then later compete on a free market. My doubt, I must say, about the government is that they'll do it. I would be surprised if we are able to persuade them to make this investment. It is just possible that they might listen to big companies like RTZ, who have got international interests, about the dangers of taking a very short-term view and letting the industry collapse. It is very, very costly to revive the industry. We found that out before in our history. I would like to say to your listeners, who must be desperately concerned about the situation, that I think they will. I think they might produce something, but I'm afraid unless they move very fast, it won't be enough. And particularly, I'm worried about Giva.
While the meeting was underway in Westminster Hall, another meeting was taking place in the Department of Trade and Industry, this time between a Cornish delegation and the Minister for Industry, Peter Morrison. The delegation wanted to know if the government would commit itself to supporting Cornish mines, but Mr. Morrison, as he's done before, refused to be drawn. Afterwards, I talked to one of the delegation, St.Ives MP David Harris, and he denied that he was downhearted. He said that the meeting had to be seen as just the next step in a continuing process.
I'm convinced that the whole matter will be decided by the Cabinet. What I think is the value of today is that we've brought the whole issue right to government's doorstep into Westminster. Speaking personally, I've been immensely heartened by the support shown by the 500 people who came on that march, and I shall remember that march for the rest of my life, and I'm sure everybody else who's been on that march today will also remember it. We've got to keep up the pressure.
But trading in tin is supposed to restart, if not this weekend, then next week sometime. The price of tin has widely predictable drop catastrophically as a result. People like Ken Gilbert, who've got people out with protective notices of redundancy, haven't got time to mess about. When is the Cabinet going to make up its mind? Did the Minister give any indication?
No, he didn't, but that sentiment which you've just expressed is the one which I put personally to the Minister a few minutes ago and said to him, look, there is not much time, and I tried to convey to him the urgency which ran through the meeting we've just had over in the House of Commons, as was expressed by people from Pendeen and St. Just. And I said to him, quite frankly, look, we haven't got much time, and the government really has got to take a decision to save Giva.
Do you think that your message isn't impinging, it's not getting through?
I think our message is getting through. It's gone right up to the Prime Minister. I myself questioned the Prime Minister on this in the House of Commons last week. I know she herself is now involved in it. I think also, perhaps a heartening sign in all this, is that the Minister, whom we've mainly had talks with, in recent months, Mr. Paul Channon, is now the Secretary of State for Trade and Industry in the Cabinet, where the decision will be taken. So I think that is a good sign. But we, the MPs, are going to go on pressing the urgency of this and the necessity, the absolute vital necessity, that the government takes a decision quickly and takes the right decision if Givor is to be saved. We've left the Minister in absolutely no doubt about the position and the fact that jobs are at stake, and indeed I go further than that, that communities are at stake and that industry is at stake. And I think today's exercise has been well worthwhile, and anyone who went on that march and saw the effect that it had right on the City of London, going straight through the City of London, and also straight up Fleet Street cannot for 1 second doubt the value of today's exercise. I would suggest
but would I be right in looking around this room now, after the Minister has just left, that you're disappointed?
No.
There's a great air of gloom over the room.
No, there's not an air of gloom. I think there's an air of realism, because quite frankly we did not expect. I've been to enough meetings with ministers. You're very rarely told, oh, well, yes, thank you for coming. Of course I agree with you. Of course you'll get what you want. You know, life isn't like that. We have to go on plugging on this. But please do not convey to anyone the impression that today's exercise has been a waste of time. Nothing could be further from the truth. I believe that today's march and lobby of Parliament will go into Cornish history.
But will it also be closely followed by the next chapter by the closure of Givor Mine before the government gets its act together?
Not if I have anything to do with it.
On the train home, it was a time for reflection. Had the march done what had been hoped for it? Or was London, as perhaps in the past, to remain indifferent to the Cornish cause? For most of the miners, I suspect, the main worry was whether the beer would last out to Penzance. After all, on the 1978 trip, the buffet's beer stock had vanished by Taunton. Cornish lads had drunk it dry. But were the organisers satisfied? I spoke to John Foster, Secretary of the Transport and General Workers Union in Cornwall, and Alan Taylor, who'd organised the day's lobby. John Foster, were you disappointed by the Minister's attitude during the meeting?
No, there was nothing happened that I didn't expect. The main purpose was not to get an answer from him, because I didn't expect that in the first place. What I did want is for us to be able to get the message across to him that we're not a lame duck industry, that we're not looking for financial support infinitum, but in the short-term financial support. And I think we did a good job between us putting the message across to him.
Let's go to Alan Taylor now. Alan, how successful was the lobby?
Difficult to tell at the moment. We're at the moment going through the train, making a count of the number of MPs we actually contacted. But I'm happy that we covered as many people as we could. We got some very positive response from some of them, and we can ask for no more.
You were hoping to lobby Margaret Thatcher, you were hoping to lobby Paul Channon. I take it that those... No?
That's very true. Margaret Thatcher wasn't in the House, she wasn't available. Paul Channon likewise. And many of the big names that we would have liked to have contacted were not available. But that's the luck of the draw. We have a list. We sent a card to every one of them. Those that are available came down to speak to us. And we had some very positive responses from a lot of people. And I'm personally quite happy.
If I can ask the pair of you now then, I mean, do you think today's exercise has been worthwhile in terms of all the money, effort and labour that's gone into it? Is it worthwhile?
I think most definitely. I think we've achieved what we came up here to achieve. We've had a very good lobby. We've had a very good response from the MPs we've met, and we've made a lot of MPs aware of the situation.
And finally, what of the miners and their families? Did they think the day had been worthwhile?
I think so, yes. I think it was a bloody good turnout all round. I just hope we achieved what we set out to achieve, and that was to get some money poured into Cornish tin from the government. Whether we will or not is another story, and we won't know, I suppose, for a little while yet, but we're all sort of optimistic that something will turn out of it, yes.
What's your main memory of the day? What do you think you'll be telling your grandkids about?
Well, I think the main memory was the actual march itself. It was fantastic. A hell of a turnout by everyone, and to see so much media there covering Cornishmen. And I think it possibly it's brought home to London then, or the government, that there are people in Cornwall and there are people down there that really do care about their jobs, and we want to keep them secure.
I think it's raised a bit of interest in the matter, because I think a lot of people in the country will now know that there is mining in Cornwall, and they didn't know before, and it is such a vital employer down there, something's got to be done. It can't just be let slide, can it?
And you've been on the march now, it's all over, you're on the way home. Was it all worthwhile?
Yes, definitely, definitely, because it was a gesture from the Cornish tin miners that there's life after the Tamar, and that we wanted to get our presence felt, and I think we did that. I think the people of London enjoyed it as well.
But do you think it's going to save our minds?
No, I don't, but I think if you don't do anything about it, then you're not going to gain anything. At least it's made, I hope it's made Mrs. Thatcher take notice of us.
Is she right? Are they all right? The next few weeks and months will only tell.
That report was compiled by Mark Rosselli and produced by Julie Stanton. It was first broadcast last Thursday. Now, with the time at 11:30, it's time for the